Live on YouTube?
Yeah, but they're gonna have to
Bad.
change the.
Can I say it?
Gonna have to change the camera. You are out of frame.
Okay, so for anyone on Facebook, you're just with me for the moment. The plan is we are going to do quite a long live, mega live, where I'm going to talk about training, winter training secrets. We're actually going to try something kind of different today, where why this is going to be a long live. I'm going to batch record all my podcast content for next week live in one go today. So you'll kind of get to see behind the scenes of what this production process looks like. It's not glossy, it's not slick. There's going to be loads of stupid outtakes where I'm going to say the wrong thing. Wes is going to mess up cameras and he's going to have to come in front of the screen and we're going to have to move stuff. I'm going to do ads. I'm going to do intros for podcasts. I'm going to do a long podcast at the start, not long. It's going to be 10, 15 minutes long, where I'm going to talk about the secrets to winter training. And that's around dose, frequency, and duration. Then Sarah's going to join me in the studio and we're going to record a writer support episode. And the topic for that is going to be 5 fixable reasons you're not going uphill very fast. Then I've got a ad to do, or not an ad, but more of a public service announcement to do for our new community. We just launched a new free school community. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. I'll briefly tell you about what it is now. You can check it out if you're interested. Just go to skool.com/roadman. Totally free. I just got really frustrated about like how I interacted with cycling. It just didn't seem like there was a home or a hub for talking about cycling. Twitter just has become increasingly politicized and just weird grok videos taking people's clothes off. So I wanted somewhere where we can talk about pro cycling and also somewhere that aggregates cool resources that we all need as a community. So I wanted to build a free tool to give back to the community, and that's what that is. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a while. I think the link for it's in the description below somewhere and you can join it totally free. In there at the moment, there's like a tire pressure calculator. There's a nutrition masterclass, a 14-day kickstart, because who doesn't need that at this time of year, and a few other bits and pieces. In between the videos, I am going to answer some questions. So if you have questions in either YouTube or Facebook, let me know. Are we live on YouTube, Wes?
Yes.
We're live on YouTube. So if you have questions, I'm going to check in at the end of the first video for questions. So I'll get through all them then. But this is going to be our first ever mega live. You sure we're live on Facebook, yeah? Or on Instagram, on YouTube?
YouTube, yes. I'm watching.
Okay, Wes is watching. Oh yeah, we are, yeah. Perfect. So there's 8 people watching along with Wes. So yeah, I'm going to pull it up actually before I start into the first podcast. I'm going to pull it up on this stream. So if you pop questions you have into the live chat, yeah, there's a live chat feature. I will get to the questions at the end of the first episode. So I'm going to slide this out of shot. Hopefully that's out of shot now. Where's that out of shot for?
It's alright.
It's okay?
It's not in shot, you can have it.
Okay, so I'm going to do the first podcast episode is going to be the secret to winter training. And this will get edited and chopped up for Wes, and I'll do my best to try and get through this in one clean take, but I may make a mess of this and have to do it again. So this is like the little bit of a secret sauce look behind the scenes at how we make an episode like this. So this episode is called The Secret to Winter Training. The secret to winter training, it's dose, frequency, and duration. It's not motivation because, trust me, motivation will fade. And it's certainly not an AI plan or a training app that just delivers some new version of cookie cutter. Just please don't do that stuff. It's not even a winter of riding around in zone 2 all winter. Here's what actually trips most cyclists up. Because winter doesn't fail because people do too little. It fails because they stack too much unstructured work that feels easy, but it's never truly easy. They add hours when they can, they let endurance drift into moderate intensity, and they remove recovery weeks because nothing feels particularly hard. Fatigue slowly and quietly accumulates in the background. So when the season actually arrives, the aerobic fitness looks fine, but the system is already carrying too much load. The scaffolding isn't really built. The The body can ride, but it can't absorb the training that actually moves performance forward to the next level. So if you give me like 10, 15 minutes, I'm going to give you an operating system for winter training that explains exactly how to apply the right stress often enough for long enough without breaking the system. You'll leave with knowing how to set your week up, how to adjust it when life hits as it invariably does, and why consistency beats those hero volume weeks every single time. I'm going to break this into a couple of acts, and the first act is why winter training fails most cyclists. Let me start with a rider you probably recognize because you might be him or I might have been him in the past. He's disciplined. He trains year round. I'm not talking about a beginner here. He knows what zone 2 is. He knows the physiological adaptations in each zone. He knows what polarized means. He even maybe has listened to some of my podcasts with Steven Seiler. He watches Dylan Johnson or GCN videos. Maybe even has Trainer Road or some sort of training plan. And every winter he decides he's going to build this massive base. This is going to be the year. It's a big, big winters where it's won. Those sort of phrases. And November looks great for him. If you click into his Strava, November's flawless. December, it's actually probably looks even better because he's stacked an Alfesta 500 in there. He stacks long rides on the weekend. He adds an extra spin midweek because it feels easy. And he tells himself, it's only endurance riding. It's only endurance. I'm building a base. He thinks he's being sensible. Then January arrives. Sleep starts to fracture a little bit. He's not shattered, but he never really feels fresh anymore. Heart rate is a little higher on easy days. Heart rate variability is just dropping a little bit on the trends. Legs feel heavier on the climbs than they should. Then the first cracks appear. He skips a session, then another. Now he catches a cold. Or he keeps training through the fatigue and the cold because he's too scared to lose that fitness. And by February, he's fit still, but he's flat. He can ride, but he can't sharpen the knife anymore. And now we're getting into the part of the season where you need to sharpen the knife. Intensity feels like a threat that could bring this whole house of cards rattling down. This is what winter failure looks like. It's not dramatic. It's a slow leak for motivated riders. And the first reason it happens is that smart cyclists, well, they often do something that isn't very smart. They copy what they think works without seeing the full system behind it. They see pros that are riding big hours, so they ride more. They see influencers on Instagram doing long, steady rides in Girona, so they go and do the same. They hear, just build the aerobic base, and they interpret that to add more hours wherever you can. But winter's not where you win by doing the most hours. This isn't a Strava contest. This is why they've gamified the wrong things in Strava. Winter is where you win by staying absorbable. And I love that word. It's a word I first heard when I signed for a French team, absorbable. Because the purpose of winter training, it's not to create your peak. The purpose of the winter is to build a platform, a scaffolding, a framework that lets you tolerate high quality work later in the summer. Because if you're a busy athlete like me, riding longer happens more in the warmer months. You're meeting the friends for those harder group rides. You're doing, like the Roadman group, we do a Thursday chop. The races are in the summer months. It's where all the fun is. And if you load winter wrong, you raise fitness a little, but you lower that resilience an awful lot. And resilience is what decides your season. And by resilience, I mean your base, which allows you to absorb the training. Your body, which remains injury-free, resistant to sickness, resistant to just those nagging nicks and knocks that you get when you're the opposite of it, when you're a brittle type rider. The second reason that winter fails is that endurance rides are treated like they're free. There's no cost. There's no consequences. They absolutely are not. Endurance training, yes, it's lower intensity, but it is still a stress. It's a mechanical stress. It's a metabolic stress. It's an atomic stress. It's a hormonal stress. It carries a cost that shows up when you stack it in with life. And that's the invisible part that most people miss. When you stack it in with life, you need to start looking at your total stress capacity. That's the ability to train and handle life stress cumulatively. Most amateur cyclists, they're not limited by how hard they can train. They're limited by how well they can recover. Pros don't just have more time to train, they have more capacity to recover because it is their job. I can't remember who on the podcast was telling me a story about their wife came home and was giving them some stick for sitting down playing Xbox. She's like, "What are you doing?" And his response was, "I'm working." And it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but that's what they have. They have that bandwidth to be able to recover. Their life is set up to absorb that training. They structure their day to absorb that training. They have fewer competing stressors than me or you do. Many of them are in warm climates. They're not commuting in the dark. They're not juggling meetings and trying to be a decent partner or parent on 4 to 6 hours per night of sleep. So when you copy pro rider's volume without pro rider recovery, you're not doing base, you're doing chronic fatigue management. The third reason winter fails is misapplied progression. Cyclists often progress winter by adding just duration. Longer rides, more hours, more days. That can work, but only if dose and frequency are controlled. If you simply add duration on top of a week that's already full, well, you create a training load that feels fine for 2 weeks, and then it totally collapses in the third and fourth week. This is the classic winter pattern that I see. You get these few hero weeks, think that Festa 500 again, followed by a recovery week that turns into 2 recovery weeks, if we're honest, at the start of January, followed by a restart, maybe a change of coach, and it just never gets that momentum going again. So the question is not, how do I train harder this winter? The question is, how do I apply stress in a way that I can repeat week after week, month after month, without losing the ability to respond to training? And this is where dose, frequency, and duration come into play. Let's call this part Act 2, the real variables that matter. Because most conversations about winter training, they get stuck in intensity distribution. Should you go polarized? Should you go with some sweet spot work? How much strength and conditioning should you do? Should you do tempo in your base period? The problem is, these debates that you see online raging all the time, they often ignore the bigger lever. And the bigger lever is not what you can do. It's how much, how often, and for how long you apply that stress. So let me define these 3 variables for a second. Dose is the size of the stress you apply in a given session or a given day. Think of this as the punch. Frequency is how often you apply meaningful stress across the week. Think of this as how many punches I'm actually throwing. Now, duration is how long you can hold a given level of training stress across weeks and months before you change the load. Think of this as how long you can keep punching before you pause, shift, or reset. Winter success is getting those 3 things right for your life, your physiology, and your goals. Dose is not just intensity. Dose is total stress. And this is the part that a lot of amateurs miss. Because a 3-hour endurance ride, it can be a bigger dose than a 1 hour, 1.5 hour, really difficult threshold session, depending on a few things, like your fitness, your fueling, and your recovery status. This is where cyclists misinterpret winter, and they equate easy with low dose. But easy intensity, it doesn't automatically mean low dose. A low intensity ride can still be a high dose if it's long, if you're under fueled, or if it includes a lot of surges like your weekend group ride. Or even, if it's in the cold. Riding in the cold takes way more out of me during the winter. If you're sleep deprived as well, or if you're just mentally fried from work. So dose is very context specific. A 2-hour endurance ride might be perfect on a Saturday when you've slept well and life is chill and calm. You just finished your cold plunge and your meditation the night before. But that exact same ride on a Wednesday evening after a stressful day in work and battling rush hour traffic, that dose can tip you into a hole. Think of this as a practical example. Imagine you're training 8 hours a week. I think that's a duration that a lot of us watching can kind of manage. If you do 4 sessions each session is roughly 2 hours on average. That's a high dose per session. It can work, but it requires strong recovery and careful execution. If you do 6 sessions, the average dose drops, much more manageable, much more repeatable, less likely to require an optimized recovery setup. While winter training for most non-pro cyclists is often about making dose small enough that you can recover quickly while still being meaningful enough to drive adaptations. Now, there's some trade-offs to this because higher dose sessions can be efficient. They can create a big stimulus. They can build durability, drive fatigue. but they come with a longer recovery tail. If you cannot pay that recovery cost, and that's looking at your lifestyle, the dose just becomes a debt. Lower dose sessions are easier to absorb. They allow you to train more often, but if they're too small, they don't create that progression. They don't drive that adaptation. So the art here is choosing a dose you can repeat. And that brings us into frequency. Frequency is the most underrated lever, in my view, in winter training, because frequency is what builds consistency, and consistency is what builds aerobic development. Sailors' work in the broader endurance literature, it keeps pointing back to the same idea. The aerobic system responds to repeated, manageable stimulus over time, not occasional big hits followed by long recovery periods. Cyclists misinterpret frequency in two ways. First, they think more days always means better. It just doesn't. If the extra days reduce quality, reduce sleep, or increase stress, that can totally backfire. The second problem I see with this is a lot of riders think that frequency is about just riding days, but frequency is really about stress exposure. You can have frequency without overload if every day becomes medium hard. And that's the winter trap, that medium hard, the moderately hard sessions. And I see this time and time again over the winter, where you never go deep enough, but you also never recover. The type of sessions that would fall into this kind of bucket for me is the tempo rides, group rides that are just a little bit too hard, or with stronger riders where you have a lot of surges, just stuff that's slightly too hard, endurance sessions where it's always pushing you into that fat max. You end up stacking that medium stress every day. No single session kills you, but the week in totality when you zoom out is what kills you. Think about this hypothetical rider. He's training 6 hours a week, but he often does best with 4 to 5 rides. Why? Sorry. The beauty of live, isn't it? Something popped up on my screen. But he often does best with 4 to 5 rides. Why? Well, because you cram 6 hours into 3 rides, the dose is high. The recovery cost that we talked about is high. You might miss one ride and lose 1/3 of your entire week. 33% of your week disappears if you miss one ride with this setup. And you often end up riding too hard, especially if you've missed a session, because you feel a pressure to make every single ride count. But if you spread the week across 4 or 5 rides, now each session dose drops. You can keep intensity controlled, you can recover between the sessions, you can keep momentum. Higher frequency, it has so many benefits. I'm a huge fan of it because we get more swings at bat. We're out the door more, which means we're honing our skills better. We're building that consistency. James Clear talks about this: vote for the type of person you want to become. And that's what happens when you get out the door more, when you put your kid on more, when you press start on your bike computer more. You build that consistency. You vote for the type of person you are. But there's amazing aerobic signaling benefits as well. But higher frequency, it does increase logistical stress. I had a US tier 1 operator on the podcast, and he talked to me about admin. And I've become a huge fan of this idea of admin because there is a toll to having to get out the door more. And the toll is real, and you don't hear people talking about it. It's a toll in terms of the extra laundry you have to do, the extra time you have to spend, because it takes time to get into your kit and out of your kit. You're going to end up training in the dark, in the cold. Maybe you have indoor training fatigue. It increases the cost of being a cyclist. So the best frequency, it's not just the maximum frequency. It's the frequency that your life can support without adding more stress than training removes. So just use that kind of framework to think about it. Now, duration is the third lever, and this is the variable that almost nobody plans properly. Most cyclists change their winter training based on emotion. They feel good, they add some extra volume. They feel tired, they start to panic that the wheels are coming off. They feel bored, maybe they switch plans or switch to a new coach. Winter training needs longer time horizons. You need to zoom out, this general's tent approach, where we need to zoom above it. Your aerobic adaptations, they don't care about your mood this week. It happens over longer time frames. They care about what you repeat for 12 weeks, 16 weeks. Duration is also where base gets misunderstood totally. Base is not the phase where nothing changes. Base is a phase where you build capacity in a controlled way. You keep the stress within a range you can absorb. You stay in that range, stable enough and long enough for adaptation to accumulate. Longer duration gives you these compounding benefits. You get better at the work. You accumulate time at the right zone, at the right intensity. You build that durability. But longer duration also increases the risk of monotony, of under recovery, of stagnation, if you don't adjust the dose and recovery along the way. In winter, most riders benefit from longer duration with small, intelligent changes rather than consistent reinvention. I'm calling this part Act 3, and this is how these variables interact. And it's really interesting. But before I jump into Act 3, I just want to talk about something that we've been quietly building in the background for the Roadman cycling community. I got frustrated about 12 months ago because when I was chatting with World Tour coaches, what I seen was World Tour coaches were coaching their riders according to a framework. They built 5 steps, 5 pillars of performance, and they didn't look at any of these as negotiable. It was training, strength and conditioning, nutrition, proper recovery protocols, and having a community or tribe. Now, that was built inside every coach, every conversation I had. If you go back on the podcast, that's a reoccurring theme. It's a golden thread that runs through, whether you're talking with Olaf Boo from Uno X, Dan Lorang from Bora Hansgrove, or Christian Shroud from Jaco Alua. I got this golden thread theme running through them all. But I got increasingly frustrated when I seen amateur riders and they just didn't have this. They had maybe 1 or 2 of these pillars. So I didn't want to build this, but I also want to serve the community. So in the last 12 months, I've been quietly building this in the background, a system that includes coaching, strength and conditioning, recovery protocols, world-class nutrition, and community. And it's finally here. We opened it up a few days ago and it's actually almost sold out. We've had an application process, but this is kind of my call to you. If you want to skip the application process, if you're ready to get going, it's not a free community. It's 195 US dollars per month to jump into this. But if you are ready to skip the application process, if you pop me an email on Anthony, ANTHONY, at roadmancycling.com, you're going to skip the queue and I can get you started in there today. We're going to cap it out once the community hits 100 people. So I think there's about 25 slots left. Let me get back to the video because here's the most important point in this entire video. Dose, frequency, and duration. These aren't separate knobs. They are linked. And if you increase dose, you usually need to decrease frequency or shorten duration. If you increase frequency, you usually need to decrease dose or increase recovery. If you extend the duration, you must make sure dose and frequency are sustainable. And this is where winter training becomes simple in a really good way. You stop asking, what's the perfect workout? What's the perfect session? Maybe the most common DM I get. You stop asking that question and you start asking, what's the combination of stress that I can repeat for the next 16 weeks? And let me make this really concrete for you. Because if you love long weekend rides, that's fine. But the weekend ride is a big dose. The recovery tail is long. So you can't also stack high frequency, medium hard sessions midweek and expect to stay fresh all winter. If you're time crunched and you can only ride 4 days, your frequency is lower. That means that each session has to carry more of your weekly load. Dose goes up. That increases the recovery cost. So you must control intensity and protect recovery, or you'll drift into this medium hard trap that's just so common. This is also why more is not always the way, and that sometimes less can actually be the move. Because winter, it's not just about what you can survive, what you can tolerate for the winter. It's about what you can absorb. And it's back to that word again, absorb. Because a winter with slightly less training stress, consistently applied, often produces a much better spring than a winter with really impressive weeks that look great on Strava, but you can't sustain. Consistency beats these hero weeks every time because adaptation isn't linear. Fitness gains come from repeated exposures, not these isolated achievements. And if you want a simple test, ask yourself this: could I repeat the week that I'm doing right now with minor progression and overload for the next 6 weeks without needing this mammoth rescue recovery week? And if the answer is no, the week is not a good winter week. It's this sort of ego-built week, built for Strava comparisons. Now, let's take a second to talk about how to actually build this winter training framework. Act 4, we're calling this, and this is like the practical part of it, because I'm going to give you 2 frameworks based on weekly hours that I think are quite common. We'll say a 6-hour framework and then an 8 to 10 hour framework. And these aren't rigid plans, and this is not going to plan out your whole winter for you, but it's a fun way to illustrate what we're talking about. These are, maybe think of them like templates that you can adjust using those 3 variables if you go back and watch this video and examine those closely again. And when I mention intensities, like, the real focus is, I will mention intensities, but the real focus here is on controlling stress. So let's talk about that 6 hour per week. The biggest mistake I see at 6 hour per week is this idea of making every ride count. Because when you try to make every ride count, you make every ride too hard. At 6 hours, you win by protecting low intensity work, keeping doses manageable, and sprinkling in just enough intensity to keep the system awake. Frequency, I would honestly target 4 to 5 rides per week. Why? Because it lowers the dose per session and it improves consistency. So a sample week might look like 2 endurance rides, that's 60 to 75 minutes, truly easy endurance rides, nothing above zone 2. Don't let them drift into tempo. These are aerobic maintenance and they're going to support recovery as well. 1 quality session, 60 to 75 minutes, where you touch something above endurance. And this could be short threshold intervals, controlled sweet spot, or even VO2 microbursts, depending on your history. In early winter, it's often better to keep this controlled, not maximum efforts. 1 longer endurance ride, 2 to 2.5 hours plus, needs to be steady, it needs to be fueled, it needs to be managing that intensity. And that optional 5th ride of 45 to 60 minutes, really easy, where your recovery ride, maybe you're focusing on skills depending on fatigue. The long ride is your big dose. You got to make that clean. You're not going out on a group ride for this. You also got to fuel this properly. You got to keep it steady. At 6 hours, you cannot build huge durability. I'm going to be totally honest with you. You're not going to build huge durability through the duration of these rides. So you're going to have to try and build durability through frequency and consistency, the old magic of compounding. You're training the habit and that aerobic signaling, not chasing those one-off rides because you don't have time for them. And in terms of progression, I would progress this by adding small amounts of time to the long ride every 2 or 3 weeks, or by adding a little work to the quality session, not by turning easy rides into tempo rides. And if you're watching this and you're over the age of 40 years, you probably do need to tweak this, especially if you have a stressful job or poor sleep. The winter move for masters riders is often reduction. It's often subtraction and not addition. You want to try and create space to increase recovery a little bit to maintain that frequency. And that might mean 2 truly easy endurance rides, 1 moderate quality session, and 1 long ride that's not as long as you wish it was. Masters riders, they often don't lose by doing less. They lose by doing way too much, and they just don't get to the start line fresh enough. Let me jump in and look at that second framework, that 8 to 10 hours a week. And this is the sweet spot for many of the serious amateurs watching. Enough volume to build real aerobic capacity, not so much that you're living like a professional athlete. I would target for frequency 5 to 6 rides per week. Now you can spread stress across the week. Dose per session can be moderate, so you can include 2 quality touch points per week if you recover well. So a sample week might be 2 endurance rides of 60 to 90 minutes, easy and controlled, 1 tempo or sweet spot session, but structured, not an all-out free-for-all, something like 2 by 20 minutes at a controlled tempo or low sweet spot like 88 to 91% of threshold, depending on your phase and your goals. And then 1 higher intensity session, but not a death march. Early winter might be like short VO2 work or some high cadence aerobic work or even some hill sprints with full recovery. The goal is that neuromuscular and aerobic stimulation, not to dig a huge hole. The endurance ride with this sort of time availability, you can stretch it a little bit longer. It can go to 3-4 hours. But again, focusing on the same things, fueled and steady. You can add in an optional 6th recovery ride if you have time for it. But Dose control is where you need to be is what you need to be thinking about here. And this is where many riders drift into medium hard because they feel capable. The long ride becomes that group ride with the group that's just a bit too strong for you. The tempo ride becomes a threshold session. The endurance ride becomes a fat max session. Suddenly, every day has a little bit of bite in it. You must protect the easy days. If your easy days are not easy, you have no space for the quality hard rides and you have no space for adaptation. At 8 to 10 hours a week, you can build real fitness. You can build real durability. But durability comes from repeated work, not those occasional massive weeks that we talked about. A consistent 3-hour ride every weekend for 10 weeks beats doing 5-hour rides for a couple of weeks, followed by a couple of weeks off. How would I progress this? I'd progress it similar to the last way. I'd progress this gradually by increasing the long ride or slightly increasing the total weekly endurance time while keeping the same number of quality sessions, or progress by improving execution. And that just means better fueling, better pacing, better recovery, better admin around the off-bike stuff rather than adding just load. And I keep hammering home this point about the off-the-bike stuff because life stress really matters. Winter is where life stress is most underestimated, in my opinion. And life stress is the part of the equation that if you take nothing else from this video, take this. That training stress is not separate from life stress. They add up. If work is intense, sleep is poor, if your nervous system is already loaded, the same training dose becomes very costly. So your winter operating system, it needs a decision rule. And here's one simple rule I would say you should try and incorporate into your winter. When life stress rises, and be honest with this, reduce dose first, not frequency. Keep the habit, keep moving, but make the sessions shorter and easier. A practical example of this is you planned a 90-minute endurance ride, but you had a brutal day, boss is shouting at you, you slept badly. Do 45 minutes easy instead. Same frequency, lower dose, lower cost. Or maybe you've planned a structured tempo workout, but your resting heart rate is up and your heart rate variability is dropped. You just feel flat. Well, just turn it into an endurance ride. Keep the duration if it's not too costly, or shorten it. Save the quality for when you can actually absorb the quality. This isn't like you being weak or wussing out of this. This is experience. Winter training isn't a test of toughness, of manlyhood. It's a test of judgment. Like, why does any of this matter that I'm talking about today? Because we care. We want to get return on our training investment. There's a huge opportunity cost to us riding the bike, to leaving family and loved ones and missing promotions and work or deadlines. So let's make the most out of our training. Like, winter training, it sets your ceiling for the year. It doesn't set your base. That's why it's kind of a counterintuitive term. If winter training is mismanaged, you're still going to get fit, but you'll not have that scaffolding to push your ceiling into the spring. You'll always be protecting yourself from collapse. But if winter training is managed properly, you can arrive into the spring hungry, your body's going to be responsive, you can handle blocks of intensity, you can stack quality, you can actually build form because you're already not carrying this hidden fatigue. This is why spring success is often locked in by January. Not because January has these magic workouts, trust me, it doesn't, but because January is where the cost of your winter decisions start to show up. And if you're feeling that cost right now, it's not too late to do a U-turn out of this. If you overdosed in November and December, January does tend to expose it. If you get dose, frequency, and duration right, January feels stable. Definitely not effortless, just stable. And stability is what lets you build. So what's the secret to winter training, I hear you ask? Well, it's not the perfect Zone 2 ride. It's not copying the pro plan. It's not trusting our AI overlords. It's understanding that training stress and life stress must be dosed, repeated, and sustained intelligently. Choose a dose you can recover from quickly. Choose a frequency your life can support. Choose a duration long enough for adaptations to compound with recovery built in before the system breaks down. If you do that, winter stops being a grind. It becomes an investment that pays you back all season long. And here's the thought I want you to take into your next ride. When you're deciding whether to add more, do not ask, can I do this today? Can I actually get through this session? Ask, can I still do this 6 weeks from now and be better because of it? And that question is the difference between winter training that looks impressive and winter training that actually makes you fast come the spring. If you enjoyed this video and you got a lot of value for it, please do me a quick favor and press that subscribe button and the bell notification, because we have some massive interviews coming up in the next couple of months, including an exclusive with Chris Froome, which you're going to love. And let me know in the comments what you're struggling with around your training. And if you are, as I said, really struggling with it, and you want to put those 5 pillars together, pop me an email on anthony@roadmancycling.com, and you can skip the queue to join our Not Done Yet community. That's for people who are, like the title sounds, not done yet, and you're ready to write that next chapter in your cycling story. Thanks for watching. Okay, folks, that was one of the podcast episodes. I'm going to get a quick drink and I'm going to dive into the laptop and I'm going to have a look and I'll go through some of the comments. Where's that iPad is about to die. You might plug in the battery pack into it. Or do I have the battery pack? Oh, you have the battery pack. So I've got a couple of... Let me double check what I have next to do. Next up, I've got some. What have we got to do next? Sarah's going to come in and we're going to do 5 fixable reasons your climbing is slow. And before that, yes, so I've got a really cool podcast episode coming up. Be out on YouTube, podcast, all the usual cool places. That's coming up on, I think it's tomorrow, with Daryl Fitzgerald. Daryl Fitzgerald is in Science to Sport in Girona. Really cool spot. We recorded the podcast live there with him. Science to Sport coaches some of the best riders in the world. John Wakefield, who's the senior coach in Science to Sport, he's also the head of performance at Bora Red Bull. So you can imagine a good chunk of the world's best riders are stepping through the doors of Science to Sport, whether it's for bike fit or whether it's for coaching advice. So next up, what I have to do is an intro for that episode, which I actually forgot to do. So I'm going to do that now. And then I've got one, I think, short ad read to do. And then Sarah is going to join me for the 5 fixable reasons your cycling is slow. I'm just going to click into Facebook first and see if I have any comments coming in on Facebook that we should do. I don't even know how to check the comments coming in on Facebook. We haven't got too many comments coming in on Facebook. If you're watching on Facebook, you can feel free to drop your comments in and I will get back to them. They're the same if you're watching over on YouTube. Drop your comments in and I will, at the end of it, I'll get back to them. So, right, Wes, I'm going to do the intro for the Daryl episode because I know you need that for tomorrow. So this episode is around how pros actually train. So I'm going to start it off here. Bear with me. How do pro cyclists actually train? What exactly is the intensity, the frequency, and the duration? Getting your winter training right is the difference between flying in the summer and burning out by February. Ever looked at what the pros do in the winter and thought, I should be doing that, only to end up cooked, sick, or just feeling absolutely glued to the road? In this episode, I'm joined by Daryl Fitzgerald from Science to Sport, and we're going to strip back training to the 3 levers and the 3 lenses he looks at training through, the ones that matter to you, and show you what the best riders do behind the scenes, how they build base, where the intensity really belongs, and why Zone 1 is the secret weapon, and how her... Sorry, I was going to have to go take 2 on that. Now you see this is what happens. Okay, so this is the Daryl intro, take 2. How do pro cyclists actually train? Like, what exactly is the intensity, frequency, and duration? Getting your winter training right is the difference between flying in the summer and burning out in February. Ever looked at pro riders? We're going to take 3. this can take me 10 times sometimes. How do pro cyclists actually train? What exactly is the intensity, the frequency, and the duration? Getting your winter training right, it's the difference between flying in the summer and burning out in February. If you've ever looked at pro cyclists and thought, I wonder what they do in the winter, should I be doing that? And you end up copying it, and then you're sick, then you're cooked or absolutely glued to the road. Well, in this episode, I'm joined by Daryl Fitzgerald from Science to Sport to strip back the 3 levers that matter most and show you how the best riders in the world train behind the scenes, how they build base, where the intensity really belongs, why zone 1 training is a secret weapon, and how to train hard without breaking. And stay to the end of this podcast because the biggest mistake time crunch riders make will be revealed. Welcome to the Roadman podcast, Daryl Fitzgerald. Okay, and now before Sarah comes in, I have we have an episode coming with Chris Froome, which is absolutely amazing. I still can't believe we've an episode recorded and Wes almost has it edited with Chris Froome, which is just insane to me, where I sat down for almost 2 hours. But in that episode, we haven't fully built out this school community yet. This is the new community I was talking about at the start, but in that episode, I want to include an ad to make people aware that we have this new community. If you want, you can go on and check that new community out now, but this ad is going to be going into the Chris Froome episode. So here it is. Okay, this is the ad for the Chris Froome episode, Wes. Before we continue with the Chris Froome episode, I wanted to just take a second to give you a quick heads up about something really cool I'm building. It's a free resource for the cycling community, and I think you're going to love it. I've been increasingly frustrated with Twitter as the place I go to talk about cycling for the past while. There's just so much noise there and everybody's just pushing their politics on you. So I wanted to build an alternative, a place where you can talk about all aspects of cycling regardless of your level. And I'm also going to stack this members area with free resources. Stuff that you need, that the community needs, that you ask for. So to kick this off, I've added a 14-day kickstart meal plan into the community. I've added a tire pressure calculator and a nutrition masterclass that I recorded with Dr. David Dunn and Dr. Sam Impey, 2 of the leading experts in nutrition who work with a lot of the World Tour riders. You can join this community absolutely free. It takes you 2 seconds to join. I'm going to leave the link down below. All I ask for you to do is to be a good community member, to uplift others around you and to give more than you take. If you want to join it, all you got to do is go to www.school.com/roadman. The link for that is down below. Okay, and that's that. So I'm going to take 2 seconds because Sarah's waiting outside. I'm going to tell her we're ready for rider support. So bear with me and we will get cracking on that. I also need to get my notes for our rider support episode. So we are going to talk about 5 fixable reasons your climbing is slow. So I'm looking forward to that one. Okay, so Sarah is joining me. So we're going to go through 5 fixable reasons your climbing is slow is the plan. So
how many times did it take you to do those ads?
That wasn't too bad. One of the intros took me a while because you've done a real bad job of writing it.
No punctuation. I knew I'd somehow get the blame.
Before we do this, I need to do the intro for this episode into that camera as well. So Wes, I'll do the intro for this episode straight into this. If anyone's watching on Facebook, Wes has just died.
I need to fix the.
I'll get that Facebook one because people are upside down. Facebook. Where's Rexy? Okay, so 5 fixable reasons you're climbing slow. Is this aimed at me?
Me, I think.
And you know the moment down till sun, you're heightened, and suddenly you feel like someone's quietly.
Just the added pressure of
Live?
people won't see this at home, but when it's edited, if I say something totally stupid or off, you know, Anthony's like, no, you can't say that. And we start again. So no room for error here.
No room for error. I wasn't going to do the intro into this camera, and then me and Sarah get started with brother support. This has been like a mega block of podcast, and I'm absolutely burnt out. Here are 5 fixable reasons your climbing is slow. You know the moment when the road tilts up, you look down at your head unit and it starts to show those little red gradients ahead, and suddenly it feels like someone's after coming up behind you and they're dragging off the back of your saddle. That moment's absolutely no fun. You're not new to the bike. You train, you've done the hard work, and yet on the climb, you're watching wheels just drift away and thinking, what am I missing? Here's the good news. For most riders, it's not talent, it's not genetics. It's a handful of fixable mistakes. Small little leaks that add up to minutes on every meaningful ascent. In the next few minutes, we're going to walk you through 5 of the biggest culprits and give you strategies to fix them in a way you can actually apply this week. And stick around to the end, because the 5th one is the one most misunderstood, and fixing it is often the fastest way to stop getting dropped on a climb without actually having to train more. Sarah, the authority on getting dropped on climbs, has joined me.
I feel seen. I'm not the only one who struggles with this. I mean, climbing it's that moment. You kind of described it in the intro there. At the moment when you see that gap between the wheel in front of you just drifting further and further away, that elastic band.
There's not a climb in Ireland you haven't been dropped on.
So true. I'll put my hands up. But you're going to help me with all that today, aren't you?
Yeah, we'll see. I think climbing is misunderstood, and this is going to help people a lot, because there's 2 parts to climbing. There's the physics and there's the physiology side of climbing. So like on meaningful grades, yeah, you're fighting gravity, and that's how many watts you can sustain. Like everyone wants to break climbing down to, well, there's only 2 variables, you know, weight and power. And that is true, but it's also like how effectively you spend those watts. That's like your budget for the week. Like there's many ways you can spend your budget for the week. You can go out and blow it in the bookies after 10 minutes of getting your wages, or you can distribute it evenly across the week and pay your bills. So it kind of breaks down into 2 parts. It's that sustainable power that we talked about, what you can hold on the climb, and that's your power to weight that everyone rattles on about. But there's also the climb execution, and that's where I think the fixable mistakes can come in, how we approach the climb. And, you know, I don't want to give away everything here, but this is things like pacing, cadence, fuel and cooling. Like there's loads of stuff we can get into on this.
Yeah, because you are where you are with your weight at this very moment. So why not use these tricks or hacks, for want of a better word, to, you know, help you get up those climbs a little bit quicker, or maybe not get dropped as fast. So, okay, let's jump into the very first reason.
The first one is, there's a technical term for this, and it's called W-ball. But that's kind of a confusing term, and I'm going to start shallow and then I'll go deep with this. I remember one of the first times we went cycling, we were down in Cork. You might remember coming from my uncle's house, heading back into Kinsale, and there's a big steep hill on the way. And you approached this, like you didn't know what power meters were. Well, this was maybe, I don't know, a 2-minute climb. You approached it, I'd say, at 800 watts for the first 6 seconds, and then 40 watts thereafter. So
but like we were just started dating, so I was probably trying to show off a little bit.
Yeah.
And can I also say I was really hungover that day, so
you tried to go up
it was
like
not a good
Alpha
day.
Leap, but it's the distribution of your available resources over the duration of the climb, and that's what W-ball. If anyone wants to really dig into this, I had a very technical podcast with the Decathlon As You Does Air development coach Alex Wellborn. We talked about what W-ball is. W-ball is effectively your battery for effort. So if you think about that climb we talked about, that's a 2-minute effort. you have a 2-minute battery as well. So it's the distribution of your resources over that 2 minutes. So most people that I see that struggle on climbs, yeah, maybe they can improve the power to weight, but we're going to take that as like parking it for this conversation.
Yeah.
They're going to go a lot faster by just distributing that effort better over the climb. And this is often worse with people who pace off heart rate as well, because heart rate lags behind effort. So you go, oh, I can sustain this heart rate for 20 minutes, but you're actually way above your sustainable W ball power, like your critical power, and you're dipping into reserves. And eventually, you know, the mathematical equation will show you exactly where you're going to fall off the line.
But isn't this something that we see as well? You might be touching on it, but you kind of get pulled into going at somebody else's pace. We've seen, like, I think Ineos or Sky changed that, didn't they? Where they work their own numbers going up a climb rather than climbing to feel. And I think when you're really struggling with climbs and you're not very good at pacing, that's a good thing to do, right? Do your own pacing. Like, there's no point in me following you up, you know, if you're racing up a climb. I have to concentrate on my own effort. And in some cases, if there's not that much of a gap between the amount of power that two people can put out, but you shoot out of the traps really fast, but I pace it better, I could potentially beat you because you might fade halfway up or 3/4 the way up the climb.
Yeah, Wiggins is a classic example of that. He used to ride the climb rather than ride against his rivals. And it's not very romantic. Froome used to do as well. It's not very romantic. It's like, how can I get from A being the bottom of the climb to B being the top of the climb in the fastest way possible? Well, I'm just going to distribute my effort almost linear over the top of it. Now, it doesn't always have to be a linear distribution. A negative split sometimes works for people where you try and ride the second half of the climb faster than the first half of the climb. But I think that really works well because it focuses the mind to not riding the first half of the climb too hard, which maybe gets you closer to a linear distribution. But some riders were actually calling for power meters to be banned for this reason back years ago. Like Vincenzo Nibali said it was taking the romance out of climbing, that Wiggins had just ride this steady state all the way up. So I would work on that. And I think you can work on that by just going out and practicing this. Like, go out and do the same climb. Do it, you know, we'll call it instinctively ride it the first time, just the pacing that you would normally do it at. And then go out the next day and ride the same climb with this negative split strategy. And I guarantee you go faster on the negative split day.
Oh, that's really interesting. So kind of do a little test, a little
Bro
self-test.
science. Trust me, bro.
Science.
Trust me, bro.
Okay, absolutely love that. I think that's really, really good advice. Okay. The next one's around
kind of your engine, which I want to talk about, because you can sometimes it's about the type of efforts that you have practiced in the run into this, and your engine just can't sit at the right intensity long enough. By that I mean, like, you could be good on these short little rollers and punchers. Like, you can do a 2-minute climb, you can do a 5-minute climb, you can do a 7-minute climb. But then there's a limit when you start going over 15 minutes or, you know, like 15 to 45 minute, where we'll call them proper climbs, the wheels start coming off. So if we looked at your power distribution curve, you will probably have good power on shorter durations. And I really see this as being a typical when I'm looking at athletes' files. If an athlete's coming in, they've spent a lot of time on these indoor plans, like using a trainer road or a Zwift, for example, which has this almost Netflixification of training where they feel like they need a lot of intensity thrown in to retain customers. People end up having very good power duration curves for lower durations, but it's not that glamorous to go and do 45, 50-minute intervals on an indoor trainer. So most people neglect these. So long climbs, they really reward something called high fractional utilization, and that's holding a high percentage of your aerobic capacity for a long time. And that's mostly driven by like mitochondrial density and function, capillarization, lactate production versus clearance, and this new term we've kind of heard
Everyone's
of durability.
talking about durability. This term has always been there. Just to go back to the lactate production versus clearance, we have a really, I hate seeing it on my my training plan every week, over-unders. And that's essentially what we're trying to train the body to do there, isn't it? Just become a little bit more efficient at clearing lactate and then going again.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I hate that session.
But you can build I think the fix for this, it's not quite as fast as the fix for pacing, But it's just to start thinking about your weekly training to match the demands of your weekly training to what you want to get good at. Like if you're going away to ride a Mallorca 312 or an Etap de Tour that you know has long climbs, don't build your week around all these short efforts all the time. Make sure you're anchoring it around stuff like sweet spot efforts, which is like 88 to 91% the threshold. Some maybe threshold efforts like the old school 2x20 type threshold efforts. So like a week, you could progress that as well, where you're diving in instead of jumping in by 2x20 threshold, which is quite hard. You might start it with like 2 or 3 12-minute threshold efforts, and then a week later it's 2x20 threshold efforts. A week later it's 3x15-minute threshold efforts, and then week 4 you come into a deload.
Just going back to that durability piece, I know it's kind of a new buzzword. It's the function has been there forever, but this word durability seems to be popping up everywhere. Can you just talk a little bit around what it means? It's simplified.
Like it's not a new idea.
Concept. Yeah.
It's when I had Vasilis Anastopoulos on the podcast from Astana, he talked about this and he's just like, it's just a word for what we've always known, that you need to be good later in rides. So durability is almost like if you see an athlete who can climb well because the climb's 10 minutes into the ride, and then they fall apart 4 hours into the ride on the same climb. This would have happened and been vividly shown to me when I used to go and spend some of the summers in Les Deux Alpes. We'd stay at the top of Les Deux Alpes because it was super cheap accommodation. And we figured, it'd be amazing. We can ride it in the morning, first thing, like we can roll down and ride back up and we'll get a bit of a warm up, and then we can ride it last thing in the evening. So sometimes we do that. We just stay at the top, roll down. You'd be freezing after rolling down. So instead of going into the valley cold, you'd ride a bit of the climb again to warm up, or maybe the whole climb again to warm up, and you'd ride it again at the end of the day, 4 or 5 hours later. And the power drop off and the time extra it took to climb at the end of the day was shocking because I had really bad durability. So that durability is that ability to produce the same effort after a certain amount of kilojoules.
Yeah. I can't imagine riding Alpe d'Huez 3 times in a day.
It shouldn't have a massive drop off if you have some decent durability, but it's just a new word for something that we've always known. Like you're meant to be good at the end of an event, at the end of a race, because that's mainly what matters. Okay,
the next thing that I can work on to improve my climbing speed.
Actually, just before we jump into and continue with these, I just want to give a heads up about something really cool that we are building in the community. It's a free resource for the cycling community, and the reason is I've been increasingly frustrated with Twitter as a place where I used to love to go to talk about cycling on Twitter, but I'm just getting increasingly frustrated with how much noise there is there, the politics that's there all the time. So we wanted to build something like an alternative to this, a place where you can go and talk about all aspects of cycling, regardless of your level. And I'm also going to stack in a bunch of free resources in there, stuff that the community has asked for, and I'll continue to add that stuff in there. So to kick this off, I've actually added in already like a 14-day kickstart meal plan, a tire pressure calculator, and a nutrition course that I recorded with Dr. David Dunn and Dr. Sam Impey, who are 2 of the leading nutritionists in the World Tour. So if anyone wants to join this new community, it's totally free, and all the resources in there are totally free. All I ask you to do is to be a good community member, to uplift others, and to give more than you take inside the community. So if you want to check that out, you can go to www.school. That's school spelled SKOOL.
That's how the cool kids spell it.
So it's school.com/Roadman.
I think the thing that sets, the whole thing apart in there is the community. It's on fire. Everybody just putting their questions in. We've got coaches in there answering them from technical kind of aspect, and then we have people within the community who've also had similar issues come in and chime in with their problem solving. So
before I'll let you continue to talk for a second, Sarah, I'm going to stop the dog barking in the background for
Molly.
You keep the show going.
Oh God.
Cameras on Sarah.
I think just let her in, Anthony. She's a diva. She's a Jack Russell. Yeah, she's a Jack Russell and she's a diva.
Molly.
Oh, hi. Hi, Trouble. Hi. Want to say hello to everyone? Oh, she's gone again.
Okay, so we're almost there. Are we into?
No, we're on number 3. Okay, you ready?
Or number 3, okay. Did I miss one? Number 3. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Okay, let's jump into number 3.
Okay, number 3 is you're not prepared for the torque requirements of the climb or the gradient changes. And so what this looks like or how it will manifest itself to you on steep climbs, when cadence starts to drop, as it inevitably does, your legs just start to feel like concrete. Like cardiovascularly, you're fine, but your muscles give up on you. Like your quads, your glutes, they fail first. And this actually is most visible on gravel climbs. They seem to amplify this because there's like a weird search for traction on rough surfaces and awkward torque demands that kind of amplify this. So what power actually is, because we're all familiar with the term power, but power is torque multiplied by cadence. And steeper gradients... Sorry, folks, we have a dog coming in here. Sorry, you're going to have to pour it out. Close the door. This is the beauty of live, isn't it? Okay, where do you want me to start on that?
Start at the beginning.
Okay, so you're going to talk about torque again?
Yeah.
Okay, so you introduce it.
Yeah. Okay, so number 3 to help me increase my climbing speed.
It's you misunderstand the demands of the climb. And by that I mean you haven't understood that torque is different on steeper climbs. And this is... You see this happening quite a lot on gravel climbs because gravel climbs are so steep and they have this weird interaction of the surface is rough, so it forces you into this awkward torque demand. And you'll feel this manifesting itself as cardiovascularly you feel fine, your heart rate mightn't even be that bad, but your exoskeleton's almost starting to give up. Your quads and your glutes are starting to fail first. What's happening here is we're all familiar with the term power, but power is comprised of torque multiplied by cadence. So on steeper gradients, you'll often push towards higher torque demands at lower cadence. And that's unless you absolutely nail your gearing, which just sometimes isn't possible to nail your gearing. And higher torque recruits more muscle fibers that we're not used to. So it increases local muscular fatigue and it absolutely rips through glycogen as well. So if you only ever train steady state, regardless of the zone, at your favorite cadence, you're going to lack that cadence range for when the gradients do really. Like the amount of time I spent in Badlands below, like I would say 40 cadence was insane.
I was just going to say, I'd hate to see, I should really check out my average cadence on my Badlands ride because I'd say it was super, super low. But we do know that when people even get fatigued, their cadence generally does drop, doesn't it? Well, for me, and I know that that's something that we worked on in my training for Badlands. You know, I did a lot of low cadence drills to kind of make sure that I had that leg strength because we knew it was going to happen. It was going to creep in.
I think the problem with Badlands is you two things. You were really undergeared. I was undergeared for sure. I don't think we quite understood how steep the climbs are going to be. So that creates a low cadence demand, but also the load. You know, first time doing an event like that, I didn't fully anticipate how heavy the bike was going to be fully loaded with all the fuel. So when you have the steep gradients, heavy bike, it's just
heavy rider,
bad gearing. Yeah.
I think as well, the way I usually describe for new people coming into the sport, and you can see that they have a low cadence. Now, cadence is something that I've worked on, not just on hills, but in my, cycling over the last couple of years, and I'm slowly eking those numbers up from like an average of 70, 72 when I first began to, I think I'm up in the mid 80s now. That's been a really slow process, but the way I always look at it is if you have a high cadence, you're kind of using your lungs and your respiratory system to fuel your movement.
Yeah, but we're talking about almost the inverse of your problem.
That's what I'm saying. If you're using your legs, if you're using low cadence, you're using your muscular system, and your heart and your lungs can go forever and ever and ever.
So you were doing like years of unknowing strength training for Badlands.
Basically, yeah. But your heart and lungs can go forever. I mean, they're constantly working around in the background. Yes, you get fatigued, but your leg strength and your muscles will burn out a lot easier. So for me, that's just kind of like a way that I think about always trying to be in that nice higher cadence. Yeah,
I think that kind of what you're talking about there feeds nicely into the fourth point, which is around underfueling, underhydration. Because when you do find yourself in those lower cadences, now there's a glycemic demand at riding high intensities always, but it seems like it's higher. I must confirm this with like Sam Impey next time I have him on the podcast. It feels like it's higher at lower cadences. And on longer climbs, this is a problem because when people are under pressure, when they're riding at zone 4, they end up suboptimally fueling on the climb as well. And if you're doing, like, there's long climbs, like we rode Alto de Letras, which is like a 6-hour climb or something, or longer. It's like 80 kilometers bottom to top. And even some of the climbs in Majorca are long climbs as well. You could be climbing an hour on some of them. What's the Pygmayor? Like a long climb.
Really, really long.
So you'll see the pattern for a lot of people when they fuel poorly on the climb is you start okay on the climb, but the climb starts to feel disproportionately harder, regardless of the grade, the further up the climb you go. And power is dropping off. Like if you look at the power file afterwards, power is dropping off as rate of perceived exertion is absolutely skyrocketing, heart rate's going up. And why that's happening is because at those sort of intensities, we rely heavily on carbohydrates. And low glycogen, it's obviously going to reduce your sustainable power. It's going to reduce, and it's going to increase your rate of perceived exertion on the climb. And then if you couple that with dehydration, it's just like, it's a recipe for disaster, because dehydration is reducing the plasma volume, and that's higher heart rate for the same work is going to be the consequence of that. So it's just, none of it's good. But the good news is the fix is easy. Like, even if you're not using anything like carb calculators and you just want to keep it basic, most riders will perform better on a 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour, especially if there's intensity sprinkled into that ride. But fueling like before the climb is what's going to matter for you, and aiming to hydrate well before the climb as well, like in that kind of 400 to 800 mil range in the time leading up to the climb. And cooling also helps, like pouring bottles over your head, keeping your jersey unzipped.
It's an absolute game changer, the cooling kind of aspect. Just to go back to the fueling, I think if it's a ride that you're doing every week, in your club spin, I know exactly where to have a gel or a couple handfuls of Haribo on our Saturday spin. Like, I always, even if it's not in I have an alarm on my Hammerhead that tells me to eat every half an hour, and I usually stick to that rigidly. But this one spot, even if I've already eaten 5 minutes before or 10 minutes before, I will still eat at this moment, because I'm not going to really get an opportunity while I'm trying to stay on the wheels or like push an effort to drink out of my bottle or eat, because that's going to put up, my heart rate up as well when I'm eating. So at the Hammerhead, again, even when we were doing Badlands, it tells you how far away the next climb is, which is an amazing feature. So you can kind of say, okay, my next climb is 1 kilometer away, so get the grub in now, and that's going to sustain me for the climb. And I just find that really good. Just like absolutely load yourself up with carbs before that really hard climb. That would be my advice.
Caffeine.
Caffeine.
Caffeine's always your friend.
Yeah, caffeine. I'm actually going to put a really cool post into the school community today about caffeine and why it's so popular, how it works, and like the best times.
Caffeine used to be banned.
I know. Yeah.
People were using caffeine suppositories.
There's amazing.
Did you ever do that to not get dropped on the group ride?
I would do anything to get not dropped on the group ride. But there's these receptors in your brain that make you feel fatigued and make you feel tired, and caffeine basically dulls down those receptors, and that's why you feel like you've got this super high energy. So have a little look in school later and you'll see that post about when, how, and why you would take caffeine.
So interesting that we're finishing up the 5th point of the fixable reasons with the one we almost can't avoid, and it's watts per kilogram, but with a slight twist on it, because it's not the part you think. Like, there is riders out there who are strong on the flat, you're strong on the group ride, but you're constantly just getting hammered on climbs, and you're looking for that like what's the lowest hanging fruit way to go a little bit faster on the climb. It's obviously those 4 things we've talked about, but on those steady climbs, like performance there's no way of getting around. It's strongly tied to watts per weight. And that's like, when I say weight, it's like rider plus kit plus bike, everything, total system weight. But a small reduction in mass, like 1 kilogram, it definitely helps for sure. You're going to go uphill faster. But I think a better way to approach this is the 1 kilogram lighter is not going to massively help you on the flat. Putting on a little bit of extra power, like a modest increase in your sustainable power, is just going to help you all around. Like, it's going to help you disproportionately as a bike rider. And it's actually not that hard to do if you're at like a train at an unstructured level or your basic level. Raising sustainable power is... Sorry, folks, I forgot my train of thought.
Start from.
Yes.
It's not hard to do.
So raising your sustainable power just isn't that hard to do, especially if you reverse engineer the demands of the type of climbs you're going to do. If you're going away to a Mallorca, if you're going away to a Top to Tour, you kind of know what the climbs are. And then it's starting to... I put out a good blog post yesterday on Facebook about how Matej Mohoric likes to deconstruct his training. And that's effectively, it's breaking it down into its constituent parts. So you can start to reverse engineer and put a few of them into your training. Because sticking on... or taking off like 3-4 kilograms is amazing, but the crash diet often leaves you in that negative energy availability. And when you're in a negative energy availability, you can't fuel adaptations to train. And so a much easier way to get faster, it's actually just to create quite a modest deficit with your diet. So you're not crash dieting, and to focus on doubling down on trying to do some of those sessions that we talked about, like sweet spot sessions, threshold sessions, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think we do just become obsessed as cyclists with the whole weight thing. You know, even if I can't, if I'm struggling to lose weight, what if I spend $600 on that carbon printed saddle that weighs like 40 grams?
Oh, do that for sure.
Or, all the kind of
I've got
hacks that we
titanium
can get.
bottle cage bolts.
Yes.
I love them.
That's deep. But yeah, no, it's good to hear that you can kind of work on something else, as you said, like your power, rather than just trying to lose a load of weight.
Yeah, the goal isn't to be just as light as you possibly can. The goal is to be powerful for your weight. And that needs training along with a slight weight loss. So just to kind of wrap it up and wrap it all in a bow before we finish off, like we talked about, I wanted to give you those 5 fixable reasons. So it's pacing is the first one, not going into it and whacking the base of the climb. It's sessions that match the demands of your climb. It's torque cadence range, so you don't get trapped just grinding up it. It's fueling, hydration, cooling strategies for the climbs. And it's power to weight does matter, but focusing on the higher leveraged gains you can get there rather than just chasing weight for weight's sake. And my challenge to listeners will kind of be to just pick one of these in the next 14 days. Maybe it's just pacing discipline, or maybe it's adding the 2 interval sessions in a week, or having the fueling targets on your rides. Try and take one of those and run with it for the next 14 days and just track that as your own little challenge.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try and get a little bit better at pacing and not getting pulled into what everybody else is doing on the group spin, and kind of ride my own ride up the climb. Okay, folks, let me know in the comments what you did choose for that little challenge for the next 2 weeks. Thanks for watching. If you have a friend who can't climb for donuts, please share this with them, and we're going to see you next day. Okay, I think that's a wrap. I think that's everything for the live. That was a blast.